The alarm clock pierces through the morning silence at 6 a.m. Outside your dorm room window, the campus is still wrapped in that ethereal pre-dawn darkness, where streetlights create pools of amber against the concrete pathways. You can hear the distant hum of the heating system, the soft footsteps of an early riser in the hallway above, and somewhere in the distance, the low rumble of the first bus of the day carrying students to their morning classes. But inside your room, there's a different kind of energy. Your desk lamp illuminates scattered textbooks, highlighted pages, and notebooks filled with cramped handwriting from late-night study sessions. Today is the day. It's the exam you've been dreading for weeks. It's the one that could make or break your semester grade. Your stomach churns with that familiar cocktail of anxiety and anticipation. Your mind races through formulas, dates, concepts, and theories, desperately trying to hold on to everything you've learned. This is the moment where most students allow their minds to spiral into chaos, where panic takes the wheel and drives them straight into a wall of overwhelming fear. But what if there was another way? What if, in this very moment of intense pressure, you could find an unshakable calm? A strength that doesn't come from cramming more information into your already overloaded brain, but from a wisdom that's over 2,000 years old? Picture this same scene, but with a different protagonist. Young man sitting in chains in the heart of the Roman Empire. His name is Epictetus, and he's not worried about passing an exam or impressing his professors. He's worried about surviving another day as a slave. Yet from this position of complete powerlessness, this man would go on to develop one of the most powerful philosophies for navigating life's challenges. A philosophy that would influence emperors, transform minds, provide a roadmap for finding peace in the midst of any storm. Epictetus understood something that most of us spend our entire lives trying to grasp. He understood that our external circumstances, no matter how challenging or overwhelming they might seem, do not have the power to determine our inner state. From his position as a slave, he discovered that true freedom isn't found in our ability to control what happens to us, but in our ability to control how we respond to what happens to us. Think about that for a moment. Here was a man who had literally no control over his daily life, who could be bought and sold like property, who faced physical hardship and humiliation on a regular basis. Yet he found a way to be genuinely free. Not free in body, but free in mind and spirit. And from that freedom, he developed teachings that would echo through the centuries and speak directly to the challenges you face as a student today. When Epictetus was eventually freed from slavery, he didn't seek revenge or wealth or power. Instead, he opened a school, became a teacher, dedicating his life to helping others discover the same inner freedom he had found. The students weren't other former slaves or downtrodden members of society. They were Romans from wealthy families, future leaders and philosophers. They came to learn from this man, who had transformed his suffering into wisdom. The teachings that emerged from Epictetus's school weren't abstract, philosophical theories meant for academic debate. They are practical tools for living, forged in the fire of real hardship and tested in the crucible of daily challenges. These weren't the musings of someone who had lived a sheltered life in an ivory tower. These were battle-tested strategies for maintaining inner peace and personal dignity in the face of any adversity. Now, you might be thinking that your student life problems pale in comparison to the challenges Epictetus faced. After all, what's failing an exam compared to being enslaved? What's dealing with a difficult roommate compared to being owned by another human being? But here's what Epictetus understood that most of us miss. The principles that help us navigate major crises are the same principles that help us navigate daily challenges. The mental muscles we build handling small stresses are the same muscles we'll need when life delivers its bigger blows. This is why Epictetus' teachings are so perfectly suited to student life. As a student, you're constantly facing situations that test your resilience, challenge your discipline, and threaten to overwhelm your peace of mind. Every semester brings a fresh wave of deadlines, expectations, social pressures, and academic demands. You're navigating relationships with professors, peers, and family members who all have opinions about your choices and your future. You're making decisions that feel monumentally important while operating with incomplete information and limited experience. In many ways, the student experience is a perfect training ground for life. It's where you learn not just academic subjects, but how to handle pressure, how to bounce back from failure, how to stay motivated when the path forward seems unclear, and how to maintain your sense of self when everyone around you seems to have it all figured out. So let's dive into Epictetus' core teaching, the one that forms the foundation of everything else he taught. He said some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power, our opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, position, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. This might sound simple, but it's revolutionary. Think about how much mental energy you spend each day worrying about things that are completely outside your control. You worry about what your professors think of you, but you can't control their opinions. You stress about whether you'll get the internship you applied for, but the decision isn't yours to make. You lose sleep over how your family will react to your grades, but you can't control their emotional responses. Epictetus is telling you to stop wasting your precious mental resources on these external factors and redirect that energy toward the things you actually can influence. You can't control whether your professor likes your essay, but you can control the effort you put into writing it. You can't control whether you get that internship, but you can control how thoroughly you prepare for the interview. Can't control your family's reactions, but you can control whether you're genuinely doing your best. Let's make this concrete with a scenario every student knows intimately. It's the night before your most important exam of the semester. You've studied for weeks, but as you're doing your final review, you realize there are still gaps in your knowledge. Panic starts to set in. Your heart rate increases. Your mind begins racing with catastrophic thoughts. What if I fail? What if this ruins my GPA? What if my parents are disappointed? What if I don't get into graduate school? This is where most students get trapped in a vicious cycle. The more they worry about the potential consequences of failure, the less able they are to focus on actually preparing. Their anxiety about the things they can't control ends up sabotaging their ability to do the things they can control. But if you're applying Epictetus' teaching, you have a different response. You acknowledge the anxiety, but you don't let it drive your actions. Instead, you ask yourself a simple question. What can I actually control right now? Can't control the difficulty of the exam questions. You can't control how much your classmates studied or how well they'll perform. You can't control the professor's grading criteria, but you can control what you do with the remaining hours before the exam. You can choose to spend those hours in productive review rather than anxious rumination. You can choose to get adequate sleep rather than staying up all night cramming. You can choose to eat a healthy breakfast and arrive at the exam room with enough time to settle in calmly. These might seem like small things, but they're the things that are actually within your power. And they're the things that will have the most direct impact on your performance. This principle extends far beyond academic performance. Consider the social pressures that define so much of student life. You can't control whether other students include you in their social circles, but you can control whether you're genuinely friendly and interested in others. You can't control whether people like your posts on social media, but you can control whether you're posting content that reflects your authentic self rather than trying to impress others. You can't control whether your roommate keeps the room clean, but you can control whether your own behavior contributes to a positive living environment. You can't control whether your study group members take the work seriously, but you can control your own level of preparation and contribution. Epictetus had another powerful teaching that speaks directly to the perfectionist tendencies that plague so many high-achieving students. He said, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish. Instead, wish that they happen as they do, and you will go on well." This doesn't mean becoming passive or lowering your standards. It means developing the mental flexibility to adapt when reality doesn't match your expectations. Every semester, you probably start with an ideal vision of how things will go. You'll attend every class, complete every assignment early, maintain a perfect study schedule, and achieve the grades you're aiming for. But reality has a way of interfering with our perfect plans. You get sick and miss a week of classes. A family emergency forces you to travel during exam week. A professor assigns a group project with unreliable teammates. personal relationship. Becomes complicated and distracting. The students who thrive aren't necessarily the ones who never encounter these disruptions. They're the ones who can adapt their expectations and strategies when circumstances change. They understand that flexibility is not the enemy of achievement, rather its essential companion. Let's talk about failure, because no discussion of student life would be complete without addressing this inevitable part of the learning process. You're going to fail at things. You're going to receive grades that disappoint you. You're going to miss opportunities you really wanted. You're going to make mistakes that feel embarrassing or costly. This isn't a defect in your character or a sign that you're not cut out for success. This is simply what learning looks like, Epictetus approached failure with a perspective that transforms it from a source of shame into a tool for growth. He said, every art and every inquiry, and similarly every action and pursuit, is thought to aim at some good. And for this reason, the good has rightly been declared to be that at which all things aim. But he also understood that the path to any good is rarely straight or smooth. When you fail an exam, Epictetus would ask you to examine what the failure can teach you, not just about the academic subject, but about your study methods, your time management, your test-taking strategies, and your response to pressure. Every failure contains information that can make you more effective in the future. But only if you're willing to examine it honestly, rather than wallowing in self-pity or making excuses. More importantly, Epictetus would remind you that your worth as a person is not determined by your academic performance. Your grades are feedback about your current level of mastery in specific subjects, not a judgment about your intelligence, your potential, or your character. This distinction is crucial because when you tie your self-worth to external outcomes, you become emotionally unstable and prone to making decisions based on fear rather than wisdom. Think about the students, who seem to handle stress better than others. Chances are they've internalized this distinction. They care about doing well academically, but they don't define themselves by their academic performance. They work hard because they're committed to growth and learning, not because they need perfect grades to feel okay about themselves. This brings us to another of Epictetus' key insights about the relationship between our thoughts and our emotional experiences. He taught that men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. This principle is particularly relevant to the way students often torture themselves with worry and anxiety. Consider two students facing the same situation, a major presentation in front of the class. Student A thinks, this is a disaster waiting to happen. Everyone will judge me if I mess up. My professor will think I'm unprepared, probably forget everything I want to say, and stand there looking like an idiot. Student B thinks this is an opportunity to share what I've learned and practice my communication skills. Even if it doesn't go perfectly, I'll get valuable experience presenting to a group. Same situation, completely different emotional experiences. Student A will approach the presentation with anxiety, tension, and dread. Student B will approach it with curiosity, energy, and maybe some nervous excitement. Which student do you think is more likely to actually perform well? The difference isn't that student B is naturally more confident or less prone to anxiety. The difference is in how they're interpreting the situation. Student A is seeing the presentation as a threat to be survived. Student B is seeing it as a challenge to be embraced. Same external reality, completely different internal experience. This is where Epictetus' teaching becomes incredibly practical for daily student life. You have much more control over your emotional state than you probably realize, not through positive thinking or denial, but through examining and adjusting the interpretations you place on your experiences. When you receive criticism from a professor, you can interpret it as evidence that you're not smart enough for this field, or you can interpret it as valuable feedback that will help you improve your work. When you struggle with a concept that seems easy for other students, you can interpret this as proof that you don't belong in the class, or you can interpret it as a sign that you need to try a different learning approach. When social situations don't go the way you hoped, you can interpret this as evidence that you're socially awkward and unlikable. Or you can interpret it as normal human interaction that sometimes involves miscommunication and mismatched expectations. Your interpretations aren't just abstract thoughts floating around in your mind. They directly influence your emotions, your energy levels, your motivation, and your behavior. Learning to examine and adjust your interpretations is one of the most practical skills you can develop as a student. Let's explore how this applies to one of the biggest challenges students face. Procrastination is simply a matter of poor time management or lack of willpower. But often, procrastination is actually a response to underlying thoughts and emotions about the task at hand. You put off starting your research paper not because you don't know how to manage your time, but because you're interpreting the assignment as overwhelming and potentially embarrassing. You delay studying for an exam not because you don't understand the importance of preparation, but because you're interpreting the subject matter as impossibly difficult. And the exam is a test of your fundamental intelligence rather than your current level of preparation. Epictetus would encourage you to examine these underlying interpretations. Is the research paper actually overwhelming? Or are you just seeing it as one massive task instead of a series of manageable steps? Is the exam material actually impossibly difficult? Or are you comparing your current understanding to where you are? Think you should be instead of acknowledging the natural learning process? When you change your interpretation of these challenges, you often find that your motivation and energy naturally shift as well. The research paper becomes an interesting exploration of a topic rather than a judgment of your academic abilities. The exam becomes an opportunity to demonstrate what you've learned rather than a threat to your self-esteem. This principle also applies to the social and emotional challenges that are such a big part of student life. Many students spend enormous amounts of mental energy worrying about what others think of them. They interpret every social interaction through the lens of potential rejection or judgment. They see every academic challenge as a test of their worth rather than an opportunity for growth. Epictetus lived in a society where social status and reputation were even more rigidly defined than they are today. Yet he taught that seeking approval from others is not only futile, but actually counterproductive. He said how much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to others or antisocial. It means recognizing that your primary responsibility is to live according to your own values and principles, not to manage other people's opinions of you. Genuinely helpful, kind, and authentic, you naturally attract people who appreciate these qualities. When you focus on trying to make everyone like you, you often end up compromising your authenticity and attracting people who don't really know the real you. Think about the students you most respect and admire. Chances are, they're not the ones who seem desperate for approval or who change their behavior based on who they're around. They're probably the ones who seem comfortable with themselves, who stand by their principles even when it's not popular, who treat others with consistent respect regardless of social hierarchies. These students have internalized what Epictetus taught, that your character and your actions are the only things truly under your control, and therefore the only things that should be your primary focus. Everything else, including how others perceive and respond to you, falls into the category of things that are not ultimately up to you. This perspective is incredibly liberating for students who struggle with social anxiety or people-pleasing tendencies. Instead of exhausting yourself trying to figure out what others want from you, you can focus on being the kind of person you respect. Instead of worrying constantly about whether you're fitting in, you can focus on whether you're living according to your values. Now let's talk about discipline, because this is where Epictetus' background is someone who had to develop incredible inner strength under difficult circumstances becomes particularly relevant to student life. Discipline isn't just about forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do. It's about training your mind to remain steady and focused. Regardless of what's happening around you, Epictetus compared the mind to a fortress that must be defended against invasion. But the invaders aren't external enemies. They're undisciplined thoughts, emotional reactions, and impulsive behaviors that can derail your progress and peace of mind. Every day, you face situations that test your mental discipline. Will you check social media when you're supposed to be studying? Will you skip class because you don't feel like going? Will you eat junk food because you're stressed, even though you know it makes you feel worse? These might seem like small decisions, but Epictetus understood that character is built through small, daily choices. Each time you choose the disciplined response over the impulsive one, you're strengthening your capacity for self-control. Each time you choose the easy path over the right path, you're making it more likely that you'll make the same choice again. In the future, this is why developing good study habits isn't just about academic success. It's about building the kind of character that will serve you throughout your life. When you consistently show up to study, even when you don't feel motivated, you're not just learning course material, you're learning that your actions don't have to be dictated by your feelings. When you complete assignments on time, even when they're boring or difficult, you're not just earning good grades. You're proving to yourself that you can be relied upon to do what you say you'll do. Epictetus had a particularly powerful way of thinking about challenges and obstacles that can completely transform how you approach the difficulties of student life. He taught that every obstacle contains within it an opportunity for growth and character development. Instead of seeing challenges as things to be avoided or endured, he saw them as training exercises that make you stronger and more capable. When you're struggling with a difficult course, you can see this as proof that you're not smart enough for your chosen field. Or you can see it as an opportunity to develop better study strategies and deeper resilience. When you're dealing with a demanding professor, you can see this as unfair treatment. Or you can see it as practice for working with challenging personalities throughout your career. When you're facing financial pressure as a student, you can see this as a limitation that prevents you from having the full college experience. Or you can see it as training in resourcefulness and priority setting that will serve you well throughout your adult life. This shift in perspective doesn't make challenges less difficult, but it makes them meaningful. When you can see how your current struggles are preparing you for future success, you're more likely to approach them with energy and determination rather than resentment and despair. Let's address one of the most common sources of student stress: comparison with others. Social media has made this tendency even more pronounced, as you're constantly exposed to carefully curated versions of other people's lives and achievements. You see classmates posting about internships, study abroad opportunities, perfect grades, and exciting social events, and you start to feel like everyone else has figured out something that you're missing. Epictetus would remind you that comparison is not only counterproductive, but also based on incomplete information. You're comparing your internal experience, with all its doubts and struggles, to other people's external presentation. You're seeing their highlight reel and comparing it to your behind-the-scenes reality. More importantly, Epictetus would point out that other people's achievements and experiences have no bearing on your own path. Their success doesn't diminish your potential for success. Their opportunities don't reduce the opportunities available to you. Your talents don't make your talents less valuable. Your only meaningful competition is with yourself. Are you more knowledgeable, more skilled, more disciplined, and more mature than you were last semester? Are you making choices that align with your values and move you toward your goals? Are you becoming the kind of person you respect? These are the questions that actually matter for your development and happiness. Other people's achievements can serve as inspiration and examples of what's possible, but they should never be used as a measuring stick for your own worth or progress. This principle becomes particularly important when dealing with academic setbacks. If you receive a lower grade than you expected, the natural tendency is to immediately start comparing your performance to that of your classmates. But this comparison rarely provides useful information. Your classmate might have had different preparation, different background knowledge, different test-taking strategies, or simply different strengths and weaknesses. What's useful is comparing your current performance to your own past performance and looking for patterns that can inform future improvement. Did you struggle with time management during the exam? Did you misunderstand the question format? Did you fail to review certain types of problems? These are the insights that can actually help you improve. Epictetus also had valuable teachings about dealing with criticism and feedback, which are constant features of student life. He taught that when someone criticizes you, they're actually giving you an opportunity to practice two important skills: discernment and emotional regulation. Asterisk first. You need to discern whether the criticism contains useful information. Is it based on accurate observations? Does it come from someone whose opinion should carry weight in this area? Is it delivered in a way that suggests genuine concern for your improvement rather than personal animosity the criticism meets? These criteria, then, it's valuable feedback that can help you grow, even if it's uncomfortable to hear. If it doesn't meet these criteria, then it says more about the person giving it than about you. And you can acknowledge it without letting it affect your self-perception or your actions. Second, regardless of whether the criticism is valid or useful, your response to it is entirely under your control. You can choose to respond with curiosity rather than defensiveness. You can choose to thank the person for their input rather than arguing or making excuses. You can choose to reflect on the feedback privately rather than immediately accepting or rejecting it. This skill becomes invaluable not just in academic settings, but in all areas of life. Learning to receive feedback gracefully and extract value from it without being emotionally devastated is one of the most important abilities you can develop as a student and as a person. Let's talk about relationships, because Epictetus had important insights about how to maintain your inner peace and personal integrity while navigating the complex social dynamics of student life. He taught that you should focus on being a good friend rather than on having good friends. You should focus on being someone worth knowing rather than on being known by important people. This doesn't mean being naive about the reality that relationships require mutual effort and compatible values. It means recognizing that the only part of any relationship you can truly control is your own contribution to it. You can choose to be loyal, honest, supportive, and reliable. You can choose to communicate clearly and listen carefully. You can choose to respect boundaries and honor commitments. Whether other people reciprocate these behaviors is not under your control. But it also doesn't need to be your primary concern. You focus on being the kind of friend you would want to have you naturally attract people who value these qualities. When you focus on trying to make people like you or include you, often end up compromising your authenticity and attracting relationships based on false pretenses. This principle is particularly relevant for students who struggle with feelings of loneliness or social exclusion. Instead of spending mental energy worrying about why certain people don't seem interested in friendship, you can redirect that energy toward activities and environments where you're likely to meet people with compatible interests and values. Join clubs or organizations related to your genuine interests, not just the ones that seem prestigious or popular. Volunteer for causes you actually care about. Pursue hobbies and activities that energize you. When you're engaged in activities that reflect your authentic self, you're much more likely to form meaningful connections with like-minded people. Epictetus also understood the importance of solitude and self-reflection in developing inner strength and clarity. In our hyper-connected world, many students feel uncomfortable being alone with their thoughts. They fill every quiet moment with podcasts, music, social media, or other forms of stimulation. But this constant input can actually interfere with your ability to process experiences. Understand your own thoughts and feelings. Develop genuine self-knowledge. Building regular periods of solitude into your routine isn't antisocial or self-indulgent. It's essential for mental and emotional health. This might mean taking walks without earbuds, eating meals without scrolling through your phone, or spending time in quiet reflection before bed. These moments of stillness allow you to check in with yourself, process the events of the day, and maintain perspective on what really matters. During these quiet moments, you can practice what Epictetus called evening reflection. At the end of each day, you can ask yourself questions like, what did I handle well today? What could I have done differently? What did I learn about myself or others? How did I respond to challenges and setbacks? What am I grateful for? Isn't about harsh self-criticism or perfectionist evaluation. It's about honest self-assessment that helps you understand your patterns. Celebrate your growth and identify areas where you want to continue developing. It's a practice that helps you stay connected to your values and goals amid the chaos and distractions of daily student life. As we near the end of our exploration of Epictetus' teachings, let's consider how these principles can help you approach one of the biggest challenges students face: uncertainty about the future. You're making decisions about majors, careers, relationships, and life paths with incomplete information and limited experience. It's natural to feel anxious about whether you're making the right choices, Epictetus would remind you that you don't need to have your entire life figured out right now. What you need is a clear sense of your values and principles, along with the courage to make decisions based on the information currently available to you. You can't control how your choices will ultimately turn out, but you can control whether you're making them thoughtfully and authentically. This perspective can be incredibly liberating for students who feel paralyzed by the weight of important decisions. Instead of trying to predict and control outcomes that are largely outside your influence, you can focus on making choices that align with who you are and who you want to become. You can focus on developing skills, relationships, and experiences that will be valuable regardless of exactly how your path unfolds. Remember that even apparent mistakes and detours often provide valuable learning experiences and unexpected opportunities. The key is to remain open to growth and adaptation. While staying true to your core values and principles, think about your mind as a garden that requires constant tending. Every day, you have the choice of what thoughts to cultivate and what thoughts to weed out. Will you nurture thoughts of possibility and growth, or will you allow thoughts of limitation and fear to take root? Will you water the seeds of determination and resilience, or will you feed the weeds of self-doubt and comparison? Just as a skilled gardener knows that the daily care of their garden determines its long-term beauty and productivity, you must understand that the daily care of your thoughts determines your long-term peace and effectiveness. This isn't about forcing positivity or denying reality. It's about choosing thoughts that serve your highest good and gently redirecting your attention. When your mind wanders into unproductive territory, when you wake up tomorrow morning, you'll face the same kinds of challenges you face today. There will be assignments to complete, exams to prepare for, relationships to navigate, and decisions to make. But you don't have to face these challenges with the same mental approach you used yesterday. You can choose to see obstacles as opportunities. For growth, you can choose to focus on what you can control rather than what you can't. You can choose to interpret setbacks as feedback rather than failures. You can choose to respond to criticism with curiosity rather than defensiveness. You can choose to base your self-worth on your character and effort rather than external outcomes. These choices might seem small in the moment, but they compound over time. Each time you choose the disciplined response over the impulsive one, you're building mental strength. Each time you choose acceptance over resistance, you're building emotional resilience. Each time you choose growth over comfort, you're building character. This is the legacy that Epictetus left us, not a set of abstract philosophical theories, but a practical roadmap for building an unshakable inner foundation. He showed us that external circumstances don't determine our internal experience unless we allow them to. He showed us that true freedom comes not from controlling what happens to us, but from controlling how we respond to what happens to us. As a student, you're in a unique position to develop these capabilities while you're still young and forming lifelong habits. The discipline you build studying for exams can serve you throughout your career. The resilience you develop handling academic setbacks can help you navigate any challenge life presents. The self-knowledge you gain through reflection and growth can guide you toward choices that align with your authentic self. The journey through student life is not just about acquiring knowledge or earning credentials. It's about becoming the kind of person who can handle whatever comes next with grace, wisdom, and inner strength. It's about developing the mental tools that will serve you not just in school, but in relationships, careers, and all the unexpected turns your life might take. When you close your textbook tonight and turn off your desk lamp, remember that you're not just another student struggling through another semester. You're someone who has access to wisdom that has guided human beings through challenges for over 2,000 years. You're someone who can choose to respond to tomorrow's pressures with the same inner freedom that Epictetus discovered in much more difficult circumstances than you'll likely ever face. Your mind is your fortress in a world of infinite distractions and pressures. Your character is your compass in a landscape of competing demands and conflicting advice. Your daily choices are the building blocks of the life you're creating for yourself. The next time you feel overwhelmed by the demands of student life, remember that you have everything you need to navigate these challenges with dignity and peace. You have the ability to focus on what matters most. You have the power to choose your responses to difficult situations. You have the wisdom of ages at your disposal, if you're willing to apply it. Take these teachings, not as abstract concepts to admire, but as practical tools to use. Start tomorrow. Start with the first challenge you encounter, whether it's a difficult assignment, a social situation that makes you uncomfortable, or simply the choice between staying in bed and getting up to face the day with intention and purpose. Your student years are not just a preparation for real life. They are real life. And every day you have the opportunity to live that life with the wisdom, strength, and inner freedom that Epictetus discovered and shared with the world. The question is not whether you have the ability to apply these teachings. The question is whether you will choose to do so. The alarm clock will ring again tomorrow morning. Challenges will present themselves once more. But now, you have something you didn't have before, a philosophy that can transform how you experience those challenges. You have a way of thinking that can turn obstacles into opportunities, setbacks into comebacks, and pressure into growth. This is your invitation to join a tradition that stretches back through centuries of human beings who discovered that true strength comes from within. Your student life is your training ground. Your daily choices are your practice. And your peace of mind is your reward for applying these timeless principles to the very modern challenges of being a student in today's world. The teachings are here. The opportunity is now. The choice, as always, is yours.